Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online character build video with me, Sherman. Today guys, I bring you the Necromonger Battlemage. This is a casual roleplay build. It is not meant for meta play. That's the disclaimer I have to put in my videos, guys. Moving on though, the Necromonger Battlemages are basically heavy armor Necromancer mages made for battle, and they work just like any other Necromancer except they're in heavy armor, and they stand on the front lines with their allies when they fight. They're very powerful. Alright, now I know some people are going to make some comments about this, but I'm going to tell you now, the race I chose fits it very well. So, Necromonger Battlemage, we are a Necromancer, and yes, we are Imperial with this. Now, any race can play this. Magic races, of course, will be more preferred for this because they get that higher max magicka, they get the higher mag recoveries, things like that, you know, depending on the race. But with the Imperial, you get a lot more health, stamina, and you don't get quite as much magicka, but enough to get you through the content. You also get 1224 mag recovery, 397 health recovery, 557 stam recovery. Now before I continue on, I'm going to tell you how you can play this in other roles. So to play this as a healer, don't change anything. Play it as is. And just make sure you equip some heals, maybe a resto staff, you're good to go. Now if you want to play this as a tank, you might want to equip an ice staff on the front bar and put the 64 points into health until you get to 30k. This plays an off tank, not a main tank. In trials. In dungeons, it can main tank. Anyone can main tank a dungeon. Even a rogue can. Even somebody with dual role. And medium armor can. Heck, even my monk character can. But dungeons aren't as difficult as trials. They can be in some situations, but it's mainly because it's learning mechanics. But once you learn those mechanics, content becomes really easy. So, great build for playing as a tank. Alright, now moving on to our gear. We are using, or not our gear, our spell damage, weapon damage, and stuff. Our spell damage is 2311 with a 44% spell critical. That is unbuffed. Weapon damage is 1535 with a 20% weapon crit. We are using different mundus than the normal, so you guys will see why. We do have 18,125 spell resist with 17,933 physical resist. We are using the Lover Mundus Stone to increase our penetration values. We do get major prophecy on both bars because we have inner light on both bars, and we are using Witch Mother's Potent Brew. Now, if you want to play this as a healer, I would suggest switching to the Atronach Mundus Stone, so you get that higher recovery rating. If you want to play this as a tank, I would suggest possibly, if not actually doing it, switching to the Lady Mundus Stone to get the higher resistances. Alright, so moving on now to the rest of our equipment and potions and stuff. We use tripods for when we're tanking. We use spell power pots for when we're playing damage and healer. And we do use tri-stat food for that same purpose, for playing tank. Now, when we are playing a damage dealer and a healer, we do use Witch Mother's Potent Brew. Alright, going over this set, starting with our monster set, we are using Nirnaeth. Now, Nirnaeth is actually a really good set when you can get it to work properly. And it does work quite well. But it also can be a problem for a lot of people. So the one piece adds max health. The two piece, when you deal direct damage, you have a 10% chance to summon a Lich Crystal that explodes after 2 seconds, dealing X amount of magic damage to all enemies within 4 meters. This effect can occur once every 3 seconds. Now, this thing can go off a lot, but we are using another proc set. So this thing will not be going off as much because our other proc set will take precedence over this sometimes. But when this does go off with our other set, holy cow, the damage is insane. Our next set we're using, of course, is Laws of Julianus. Now so Nirnaeth drops in Crypt of Hearts 2. Laws of Julianus is craftable in Orsinium, the Rothgar DLC, or the in Rothgar and the Orsinium DLC, and it is you can have it crafted by somebody else who owns the DLC if you do not own it, and they can craft it for you and you can equip it. So this gives you spell crit, max magicka, spell crit, and spell damage. It gives you a lot of that stuff, which is nice. The next set we're using also does something very similar. As you can see, it gives us 2-piece spell crit, 3-piece spell damage, 4-piece spell crit, and then when you deal critical damage with a single target magic ability, you launch a fire, ice, shock, or disease ball at your target that deals X amount of damage and applies a status effect. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds. So this one will fire every 10 seconds pretty much. And this one will fire every so often. Okay? They're both very nice sets to have in combination with each other. But here's the other thing that you can do with this build. If you want to change it up a little bit, you can change this monster set to something else, which is also very effective. So you don't have to use near enough, because we are using Caloran's Legacy. So you can use something that gives you maybe a heal or something else here. It really depends. Alright, going over the traits and enchants on the gear, starting with the monster set. We are using Invigorating on the helm. This is going to allow us to get a little bit more magicka, stam, and health recovery on the head. And then also we are using a medium helm with tri-stat enchants. The tri-stats is going to allow us to hybridize into all 3 roles. Now, shoulders, we are using Divines, max magicka. Obviously it's a damage dealer primarily, but... And then moving on to the other, to the chest. The chest is reinforced heavy with a tri-stat enchant. Now, the reason for the reinforced on the heavy chest piece is because it does give you the higher amount of resistances out of all the other pieces you have on your body. Moving on to the legs, we are using Invigorating again here with tri-stat. This is going to maximize your health, max magicka, health, and stamina for that ability to play tank healer and damage dealer. And then the increased health, magicka, stamina recovery also helps boost your recovery rating just a little bit more. Moving on to the belt and boots and gloves. We are using Divine's max magicka. Now the belt is light, the helm is medium, everything else is heavy armor on the body. And then the small pieces are all Divines with a max magicka enchant. The reason for the max magicka is to maximize our magicka pool. Moving on to the jewelry, we are running 2 rings tri-rune. Now to make these 2 rings, these 2 tri-rune rings, you have to have transmutation station access. That means you have to own the either own or be paying for a sub and have the Clockwork City DLC. And this will allow you to change these to a tri-rune. If you can't change these to a tri-rune, don't worry about it. It still works. You're just going to have a really high health pool, lower magicka pool. But then you can do some altercations here and there. We are using 2 spell damage on the rings though to boost our spell damage, and then on the necklace we are using a Bloodthirsty with a mag recovery. This is going to maximize our damage, but it's also going to give us really good mag recovery for our build. Alright, moving on to the weapons. We are using an Inferno Staff of Caloran's Legacy. I knew this was going to happen. Of Caloran's Legacy on the front bar with a disease damage enchant. You can use a fire damage enchant here. Either one works fine, but I like the disease one because it can put the minor defile on the enemy, and that's kind of nice. And then on the back bar we do use an infused lightning staff with a weapon and damage enchant. So this does a weapon damage enchant, increases your weapon and spell damage by 452 for 5 seconds. And because of the way we have this character set up, that 5 seconds extends into other amounts of time because of how we run our skills. So it actually goes off a lot more than that. And it stays up a lot longer. About 9 seconds in total. Alright, So now that you guys have seen this stuff, we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about skills, starting with our primary skills from our class. We do take the ultimate and active abilities all in Magicka for this, with the passive abilities. Now, we do this with all the class skill lines because we want to be able to take advantage of our character in any role situation. Moving on to weapons. We do primarily use Destruction Staff, so we take the ultimate, active abilities, and passives because we can use these in different situations. Again, Restoration Staff is something you can take and learn if you want to be able to be a healer, which is really a good option too. And then being a tank, you just need an Ice Staff, so you already got Destruction Staff learned, so you don't need to learn that separate. Moving on to armor. Light armor, we use the top 3. This way we can take advantage of these passives in our character build. Medium armor, the top 2 and the bottom 1. And heavy armor, all of them. Now, I'm not going to explain why we take all these, other than to say this. You want to take advantage of every aspect of your character. So learn all the armor passives you can. Excuse me. Moving on to world skills. You can be a vampire with this, but being an Imperial, you do take a little bit more damage, and it kind of sucks. So it's really up to you. That's an optional thing. Ultimate, Soul Assault, active abilities, Consuming Trap, and then passive abilities, Soul Shatter. These top 3 are optional. I would say Soul Summons and Soul Lock are ones I would take. Moving on to Guild, Fighters Guild, we do take the ultimate, active abilities, and all the passives. The reason why is so we can take advantage of these skills for when we're tanking, playing damage dealer, or even healer, or even if we decide we want to use a two-handed on the front bar. And yeah, you can. Mages Guild, ultimate, active abilities, and passives as well. Same with the Sigic Order. Now, I was asked the other day why I take all 3 guild skills lines and maximize all the options. Again, I'm going to tell you this, the same reason why I take all the class ones. To maximize my ability to play in any situation with any skill necessary that allows me to be more effective as a tank, a healer, or damage dealer. Undaunted. I take all the active abilities and passives. Again, these are pretty much all synergies. I mean, they are all synergies. Enter Beast does require you to hit an enemy, and it has a 25% chance of becoming a synergy, but it does go off quite a bit, and it is a really good synergy. So all these abilities here I like to use for the synergy purpose for my group play. Alliance War, Assault, ultimate abilities, active abilities are very important. Not that you need to take them, but they do help out. And then same thing with the support skills. I do take the ultimate, 2 active abilities, and the 1 passive here, so I can use them in PvE. Racial skills. We are an Imperial. Now, Imperials are kind of unique with the way they work because their passives are primarily stamina based, but we get toughness, or tough, which increases our max health by 2,000. We get Imperial Metal, which increases our max stamina by 2,000, and then we get Red Diamond, which reduces the cost of all our abilities by 3%. This means Magicka and Stamina, and this means that with using the 1 piece of light armor and 1 piece of medium armor, we actually get 5% reduced stamina costs and 5% reduced Magicka costs. On top of that, when we deal direct damage, you heal yourself for X amount and you restore Magicka and stamina. This applies to both light attacks and heavy attacks with destruction stabs, or any damage that you deal that's direct damage. You are going to get resources back a little bit. So it does help you with sustaining. Moving on to crafting, alchemy, medicinal use. This is another good one to get, and this is because when using potions, the resulting effects last 30% longer. This is primarily for when you're playing trials and dungeons. And then provisioning, gourmand, and connoisseur. These will allow your food and your drinks to last 20 minutes longer. Since we use Witchmother's Potent Brew for playing tank, damage dealer and healer, we want this, and then when we play tank, we want this. You don't have to get these, but they do help. Alright, now going over the skills on our bars, starting with the first ability. We do have Crushing Shock. Now this does all 3 damage types in a single hit, so it does flame, frost, and shock damage all at once. Enemies casting an ability can be interrupted, set off balance, and stunned for 3 seconds. Really great for that. The next ability we have is called Stalking Blast Bones, and this thing will summon a skeleton that after 2.5 seconds will charge out Attack the enemy that you had targeted when you activated it. They will explode and deal X amount of flame damage to all enemies nearby. So it hits the target and all the other enemies. On top of that, every second the skeleton spins chasing its target, its damage, the damage of the explosion is increased by 10%, up to a maximum 50% more damage. So cast this at ranged, like when you're moving in on your targets. Now, the next ability we have is called Ricochet Skull. Now, this one, you lob an explosive skull at an enemy, dealing X amount of flame damage. Every third cast of this ability deals 20% more in damage, and will bounce up to 2 times to other nearby enemies. The next ability we are using called Mystic Siphon. Now, this one, basically, you drain life from a corpse that will deal shock damage over 12 seconds to all enemies around the corpse and between you and the corpse. You restore X amount of magic over 12 seconds while siphoning the corpse, and while slotted, your damage is increased by 3%. We only have this on the front bar because that's where most of our damage is going to be dealt. Next ability we have is called Inner Light. We have this here for while slotted, your max magic is increased by 5%, and gain Major Prophecy, increasing your spell critical rating by 2191. So that's what we have on the front bar and the back bar. Moving on to the next ability, we do have Glacial Colossus. Now, this is a really cool ability. You summon this Ice Colossus out of the ground. He smashes the ground 3 times over 3 seconds, dealing X amount of frost damage with each smash. The final smash stuns all enemies hit for 4 seconds, and each smash applies major vulnerability to any enemy hit for 3 seconds, increasing the damage taken by 30%. Now, remember, this is every hit. Now, it does 1 hit over 3 seconds. So every hit, it does 1 hit. Or every second, it does 1 hit. And every second, that timer for the 3 seconds goes 3, 1 second goes by, and so you lose a second, but then it goes back to 3. Then you lose the second, it goes back to 3. So every second you're losing a second, but it goes back to 3. So it actually lasts for 5 seconds in total. I know you're going to think 6 seconds, but it's not. It's actually 5. Moving on to the back bar, we have Unnerving Boneyard. Now, this does X amount of frost damage over 10 seconds at a target location 6 meters wide, and it applies Major Breach and Fracture to the enemy, reducing their spell and physical resistance by 5,280. It also consumes a corpse on cast to deal 20% more damage. An ally standing in the graveyard can activate the Grave Robber Synergy, dealing X amount of frost damage to enemies in the area and healing you for the damage done. Really nice. Next ability we have is called Unstable Wall of Storms. Now, I've been asked, Sherman, why are you using this when the other Wall of Storms is better? The reason I use this, Unstable Wall of Storms actually does the same amount of damage almost as the other one. The thing is that when this one ends, it explodes, dealing X amount of shock damage to all enemies in the path. So if new enemies walk into it, they're still going to take a big chunk of damage at the end. Next ability we have is Shock Clinch. This deals X amount of shock damage and an additional amount of shock damage over 8 seconds. Also stuns the target for 2.5 seconds and deals shock damage to nearby enemies. Next ability we have is called Skeletal Arcanist. Now, this one will throw lightning bolts, basically. For 16 seconds every 2 seconds, it will throw these lightning bolts that will deal shock damage to the target and other enemies nearby. So this is really good for AoE damage. And then our next ability is Inner Light again for the Max Magicka and the Major Prophecy. Our last ability we have is called Ravenous Goliath. Now, this is an optional ability that you can use. I like using it because you turn into this giant, massive bone Goliath for 20 seconds, gaining 30,000 extra health and healing for 30,000 health immediately. And then while transformed, your light attacks restore X amount of health, your heavy attacks restore X amount of health, and you deal X amount of damage to all nearby enemies every second and heal for that amount. These abilities scale off your max health, so you have 25k health, which is really nice, but it's 20 second long ability, and it's a big area. So, but that is the abilities. Now we're going to talk about CP, which is the champion level system, and starting with the red tree. We are going to have 56 in the Ironclad. This is going to reduce the damage taken from direct damage attacks by 20%. Moving on to Spell Shield. Increase your spell resistance by 1729. Moving on to the middle tree here, we have 31 in the Thick Skin. This is going to reduce your damage taken from damage over time effects by 13%. 43 in the Hardy, reducing your damage from physical poison disease damage by 10%. And 43 in the Elemental Defender, reducing your damage taken from Flame, Frost, Shock, and Magic damage by 10%. Moving on over here, we have 40 in the Bastion. This increases the effectiveness of your damage shields by 16%. 19 into Quick Recovery, increasing your healing received by 5%. And 20 into Heavy Armor Focus, increases your physical resistance by 1900 while wearing 5 or more pieces of heavy armor. Moving on to the green tree, we have 40 in the Warlord, reducing your break free cost by 16%. 16 into Sprinter, reducing your sprint cost by 10%. 16 into Bashing Focus, reducing your bash cost by 10%. And then moving on to the middle green tree, we have 75 in Arcanist. This increases mag recovery by 14%. And 43 in the Tenacity, increases your magic and stamina return of your fully charged heavy attacks by 10%. Moving on, Tumbling, 40. Reduces the cost to dodge roll by 16%. 40 in the Shadow Ward, reducing your block cost by 16%. Moving on to the blue tree, 43 in the Blessed, increasing healing done by 10%. 56 in the Elf Ward, increasing critical damage and critical healing with magic abilities by 20%. 56 in the Elemental Expert, increases your Flame, Frost, Shock, and Magic damage done by 12%. And then moving on over here, we have 35 in the Staff Expert. This increases your damage done with light and heavy attacks for destruction and restoration staffs, as well as overload by 20%. We also get 40 in the Master at Arms. This increases your damage done with direct damage attacks by 16%. And then moving on over here, we have 40 in the Thaumaturge. This increases your damage done with damage over time effects by 16%. Okay, now that you guys have seen that, we are going to go down here and do some quick parses on this little guy and then on the big guy up there. And I shouldn't have done that, but my bad. We're going to go ahead and just parse this out. So, summon our skeleton. I probably don't think I will get the type of damage I'm looking for, but we'll see. Normally I can get about 26 to 30k, so I hit the thing off first, so it screws up my damage rotation on this guy. But yeah, I can usually, like I said, pull about 20 or 30k on that guy, depending on how well I can get the rotation off. Now we're going to go up here and we're going to do this rotation on this, and please excuse the Khajiit in the background. She is lonely and is looking for one of her companions, and not in that way. Alright, so here we go. Same thing with this, we're going to do the whole thing. Now remember, this one is made for organized groups, not for, this is not made for, what is that? I'm trying to use my words here and I can't spec. This is made for trial organized groups. This is not just meant for meta groups, just so you guys know. We're going to go ahead and use our ultimate too, so you guys can see what that damage looks like. But you guys can see here, I can pull up roughly about 35 to 32k DPS. It just depends on the situation, really, and how well I can keep up the rotation. So if you guys saw that, those weird spike things coming up around me, that's Caloran's Legacy going off, by the way. Those weird spike things by my head. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this get out of combat, and I'm going to show you guys the parses so you guys can see for yourselves. So on the first one, we had 3,315 spell damage with a 44% spell critical. I know the spell crit seems low, but we had 10,357 spell penetration. That's one of the reasons why we did it, was so we can take advantage of the Lever Mundus Stone and that higher crit chance. Now when we went over here, you see how the crit chance says just 5,000, and that's because this target skeleton gives you 100% crit capability, or spell penetration, and physical penetration, always. So it will show higher results. And you can see here we had 3,977 spell damage with 32,000 max magicka, 50% spell crit, and that 50% spell crit comes from having a sorcerer in your group who can give you this minor sorcery, I forget what it's called now. It's one of these things here. But see, even you get major force, you get all this other all these other boons, and the ones you apply are going to be the lower ones. All the top ones are all given to you right out the door. So the ones that they don't show here also is the debuffs from the tank and stuff, because it just doesn't. But you do get 100% pin. For some reason, it's not working as it usually does. When you mouse over this, most of the time it'll say like, oh, here you go. There you go. See, it says 100% penetration damage. Even though I only had 5,077, it will read 100% because that one works that way. I'll see if I can get this one to work. There we go. So this is the penetration damage value you can see there. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this over to a dungeon, the Depths of Melitar, and we are going to run around in here, just messing around, just so you guys can see how this thing works in a group dynamic area. When I get in there, though, I'm going to be adjusting a few things so I can play this thing more effectively as a solo build. And I'm only going to be adjusting a few things. So.
Your notes said abandoned. As in, no one left
Okay, we need to go in here. We need to grab a few skills. So one of the things we need is we need our bone armor, our summoner's armor. We're going to go on the back bar here, and we're actually just going to do this with that. And then on the front bar here, we are going to get rid of this, and we are going to grab our shield, our trusty shield, which is going to be in the Undaunted line, our spiked bone shield. And then we're going to go back to our classes and our living death, and we are going to grab braided tether. And that is going to be our heal. Now the reason for the braided tether is it's going to give us a greater heal over time. So it's actually pretty nice. And you can see that Nernith goes off quite a bit. So it's actually a really good skill to use for the most part. Alright, I already seen him. That wasn't him? Okay, he must be hiding in this corner. Okay guys, you know what's happening next. I'm gonna have to let this guy kill me. That's if he can. I mean, that braided tether heals for quite a bit. Alright, so that, my friends, is the Necromonger Battlemage. I hope you guys like it. It was a fun build to make, and it was really fun to play around with. If you don't have Caloran's Legacy, you can use pretty much any set like Shulks. Medusa's is a really good one. There's a couple other sets that drop in heavy that give you magic capable damage that are really good, and a few other light sets that you can get that are really good for this. Any one of those will work until you can get the Caloran's Legacy. Caloran's Legacy does drop in the... I'm trying to remember. Give me a sec. It drops in Fang Lair. And this is kind of a difficult dungeon to run for some people, especially on veteran mode. So you can run this on normal and get the equipment in normal and upgrade it to gold, or upgrade it to purple, whatever you want, and use it that way, or you can find another way of getting it. But that is pretty much it for this video, guys, and I hope you guys do enjoy the Necromonger Battlemage. It is a pretty cool build in my opinion, and a lot of fun to play. If you guys are wondering about the outfit style, it is all Dwarven. Okay, I'm not going to go through colors because I don't remember the colors, but it is the Dwarven style with the Dwarven staff, all that. People have been asking me to tell what it is. There you go. Alright, so that is it for this video. So that means you guys know what's coming next. Go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.